Confessions, divulging desires, secrets, and sins, often meant to cleanse the soul. But sometimes sharing the truth can have far more sinister results. Ones that can get the confiding confessor caught or killed.
She believed quite a bit in confession and was very devout about church.
A young beauty queen goes to confession, then goes missing.
At the time of her disappearance, perhaps the largest search for any kind of victim in the history of South Texas.
Her belongings are found, a shoe here, a purse there, then her body.
She was dead before she was put into that canal.
Did her confession get her killed? And when she looked into the eyes of her murderer, did she see the devil? This, the unholiest of mysteries, began over 5 decades ago.
I'm totally puzzled by something is coming up now.
After 50 years of prayers and police passion, whose confession got this frail 83-year-old man arrested for the woman's death? And where will the ultimate judgment come from? A court of law or his maker? Back in the day, 25-year-old Irene Garza was truly one in a million. Growing up in McAllen, Texas, the Mexican-American achieved for the times the unachievable.
She was sort of a heroine to many kids, including myself, someone who broke the barriers.
She went to college and became a school teacher, and she possessed enviable good looks. The beauty queen, a former Miss South Texas, had everything going for her and a bright future ahead of her.
She was likable and loving.
So the ghastly fate Irene met would shock and devastate her family and her community for a long time to come. It was the day before Easter, 1960. Irene told her family she was going to confession at Sacred Heart Catholic Church, then would be home right after. Hours ticked by with no word from Irene.
Irene Garza's parents waited until midnight, and when she didn't come home, they went to the church, found the car that she had been driving, and immediately reported it to police.
The next day, Irene's left shoe was found along the road. A day later, her purse was found in a field.
Once we saw the purse, we knew that something really serious had happened to her.
Then, 6 days after Irene went missing, a gruesome discovery. Her body found dumped in a canal.
I had not heard my aunt or my mother ever crying, and it's something I barely can even describe today. It was a very, very difficult time.
Reportedly, she was found with 2 black eyes, bad bruises on the right side of her face. She was missing her shoes and underwear, and her blouse was unbuttoned.
The cause of death was listed by the autopsy as asphyxiation, and there was some belief that she had been sexually assaulted.
The hunt was on to find the beauty queen's killer. More than 500 people were interviewed.
Irene Garza was said to have many, many suitors, and police began one by one to question those suitors as potential suspects.
None of them panned out, but one name in particular kept coming up.
John Fight.
Evidence and suggestions kept drawing them back to him.
When cops drained the canal, they found a slide projector near her body. It was later determined the projector belonged to John Fight. There was that name again, John Fight. To all in the small community, he was better known as Father John Fight, a visiting priest from San Antonio. The man police would soon learn had heard Irene's last confession. When cops talked to Fight, they noticed 2 things. Small details in his story kept changing, and the scratches on his hands.
He said that the night that Irene Garza disappeared, he went to where he was staying. He had locked himself out, and in trying to break into a window to get into his room, he scratched his hand.
Within days, Father John Fite became an even more attractive suspect when 20-year-old Maria America Guerra made her own confession. Guerra said Fite attacked her at another parish 3 weeks before Irene Garza was killed.
The woman told police that she was grabbed from behind by a man who was trying to put a rag over her face. And in the struggle, she bit down hard on the man's finger, drawing blood. Witnesses later indicated that he had a large wound on his finger.
Fite was indicted for assault with intent to rape Guerra. The case went to trial but ended in a hung jury. Then, before a second trial could begin, John Fite
pleaded no contest to a misdemeanor charge of aggravated assault and paid a $500 fine for that crime.
No murder charges were ever filed against Father Fite in the death of Irene Garza. And with that, Fite went to another parish in Texas, spent some time at a Missouri monastery, and at a religious order in New Mexico, where he helped counsel child molesters. Then Fite left the church.
Ultimately, dropped out of the priesthood altogether.
He eventually married, became a father, and settled in Arizona. Decades went by, and it seemed the case had gone cold. But things were about to heat up when yet another confession would breathe new life into this old case. The words beautiful Irene Garza spoke at confession would be some of her last. Days later, she was found murdered in a nearby canal. Her killer was never caught. But Irene's family believed the man who heard her final words, Father John Fite, was no apostle, but the devil responsible.
My family was very upset, and we began our quest for justice for Irene.
Other than the slide projector, there was no physical evidence tying Fite to Irene's murder. The lone shoe print found at the scene was never linked to him. So Father Fite went on with his life, spending time at different parishes, then retiring from the priesthood altogether.
The Irene Garza investigation itself just diminished with the passage of time.
Then 42 years after Irene Garza's death, divine intervention. Former monk Dale Tashney was desperate to make a confession of his own.
There was another priest who had been keeping a deep, dark secret since 1963. And for whatever reason, he decided that it was time to reveal his secret.
40 years before, Dale Tashney and John Fite spent time together at a monastery in Missouri. Allegedly, Tashney had been asked by a superior to counsel a new priest coming to the monastery who had murdered a young woman. That priest was Father John Fite. In the 6 months of counseling sessions, Fite allegedly confessed to Tashney that he committed the horrific crime Easter weekend.
He was not aware completely of the details of the location of the crime. He knew it was somewhere in South Texas.
Because he knew Father Fite had spent time in San Antonio, Tashney called investigators there.
He said that he had something to tell them about a priest who admitted to killing a woman.
Cops asked Tashney to follow up with a written statement. Recounting Fite's alleged confession, he wrote, "After hearing her confession, he assaulted her, bound her, and gagged her." It went on to say, he moved her to another location. After some time, he placed her in a cellophane bag and put her into a bathtub. As he left, he could hear her saying, "I can't breathe, I can't breathe." When he later returned to the residence, the woman was dead. In a recent interview with CNN, Dale Tashney explained why he believed Fite had eluded arrest at the time of the murder.
I asked, "Why are you here and not in prison?" And he said simply, "The church protected me."
Reportedly, Tashney said he was taught as a monk his job was to counsel and obey and do what his superiors said. Now, as a way to strengthen their case, investigators asked Dale Tashney to reach out to John Fite to see what he'd say. The call was recorded.
Hello, John.
Yes.
This is Dale Tashney.
All right, how may I help you, Dale?
I need to somehow clear my conscience of what has happened in the past. The things that we discussed while you were at the monastery are not quite the same, it appears to me, as a newspaper article that I had read more recently of a young girl's tragic demise.
Are you referring to the Irene Garza murder in the Rio Grande Valley?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
You told me that you did, in fact, participate in the death of a young woman.
Well, I can only say I am not the man who killed Irene Garza.
Was it somebody else then that you told me about?
I have no recollection, but I may have told you at that time.
But Fight wasn't going to be absolved so simply. Another thunderbolt was about to strike from the heavens. Father Joseph O'Brien, an assistant pastor at Sacred Heart while Fight was there, also reportedly knew what he had allegedly done.
Initially, there was a confrontation, according to Dale, in which Father O'Brien said, "Why are you telling this to police?" And Dale said, "Because I have to." Dale claims that Father O'Brien revealed that he too knew who was behind this crime.
Reportedly, Father O'Brien had talked to investigators at the time of Irene's murder, and again after Tashney came forward. He told investigators Fight had allegedly admitted to killing Irene. It seemed like arresting John Fight was imminent, but then another crushing blow.
The district attorney who was looking at the evidence announced kind of publicly that he did not have enough to prosecute.
District Attorney Irene Garza eventually took the case to the grand jury, but it declined to indict John Fight. Years later, the new district attorney, Ricardo Rodriguez, reinvestigated the case, and Irene's family got the news they'd been praying for.
John Fight has been indicted for the alleged murder of Irene Garza. We do have new facts and evidence.
Former father John Fight was arrested in Arizona and charged with Irene Garza's murder.
This whole thing makes no sense to me because the crime in question took place in 1960. I'm totally puzzled why something is coming up now.
It was quite a shock, almost, that it really happened and that person was now arrested.
6 weeks ago, 83-year-old Fight found himself back in Texas to face a higher power, the judge, at his arraignment.
John Bernard Fight, hereinafter style defendant, on or about the 16th day of April AD 1960, and before the presentment of this indictment in Hidalgo County, Texas, did then and there, with malice aforethought, cause the death of Irene Garza by asphyxiation in a manner and means unknown to the grand jury, against the peace and dignity of the state.
To which the defendant pleads?
Not guilty, Your Honor.
It's been a 56-year wait for the family, and this man, in my eyes, committed some heinous acts and murder. What I would hope would be that he would be convicted of a murder.
Today, John Fight isn't standing at a pulpit, but sitting in a jail cell, awaiting his next court appearance.
In many respects, she was a saint, and she was a saint who many people believed was killed by a priest. And they wanted justice, and the call was always there.
A day of Fight repenting may never come, but a life behind bars would help.
I hope he never goes free. Some people say, well, he's old, and I say, fine. He had a life. Irene didn't. So yes, he's where he needs to be.